right. Excellent. Great. Well, so just to kick us off, I just want to welcome everybody. Thank everybody for joining us. Welcome to Watershed Wednesday. We have many familiar faces here. So thank you to all of you for joining us. And those of you who it's your first time joining us, welcome. We are, of course, the Anacostia Watershed Society, and we do these Watershed Wednesday happy hour events once a month. We used to do them in person throughout the watershed. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to that soon, but for now, during the pandemic, we've been doing them virtually so that we can still get together and talk about things related to the river, related to the watershed. So tonight we are excited to have Mike McCartan from National Links Trust with us to talk to us about some exciting things that are happening at Langston Golf Course. So as many of you know, Langston Golf Course is located on Kingman Island, right? Most of us, when we think of Kingman Island, we think of the southern part of Kingman Island, right? South of Benning Road, the portion that is, of course, the amazing park. But we also have the northern end of Kingman Island, north of Benning Road, which is Langston Golf Course. And so that is also a, really important kind of natural area, especially a lot of the area around the border of the golf course, along the river, along Kingman Lake itself. And so we are really excited that National Links Trust has taken over the golf course at Langston, because they've got some really exciting plans and a strong commitment to sustainability. So Mike's going to tell you all about that. And we're also just really excited because it is, this big patch of land sort of right in the middle of the river. And so there's definitely a lot of potential there for restoration, for, some great habitat, doing some really positive things, engaging the community as well. So without taking all of Mike's time, I'm gonna turn it over to him so that he can tell you guys a little bit about National Links Trust and about the history of Langston, as well as some of the plans for what's going to happen there. And then we will have time for questions at the end. And if you have a question that comes up, just in terms of housekeeping, if you have something that comes up during Mike's talk, feel free to just type it in the chat and we can answer questions as they pop up, or we can, if it doesn't go with our flow, we will have them to address at the end, but that way you won't forget what you were going to ask. So feel free to just type it in as soon as it pops into your head, and we'll be sure to answer all those questions. All right, great. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Ariel. Yeah, let me share my screen. Let's see. And I'm going to get this started with the slideshow. Everybody see that okay? Yes, okay. So yeah, just as Ariel said, like kind of perfectly, just going to talk a little bit about National Links Trust, how, we got in the position that we're in, probably, getting it more into Langston from that point, especially like the history of Langston, its cultural significance, and then get to the work we are doing together with the Anacostia Watershed Society out there, and some of the efforts we've done today and how that ties into plans for the future. So just like a quick bit about National Links Trust, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to protect and promote accessible, affordable, and engaging municipal golf courses to positively impact communities. And, I think, rather than kind of talk generally about that, I'm going to go into some specifics about how that mission applies to what we're doing at Langston. Just, to kind of look big picture at, why National Links Trust, why we started the organization. The National Park Service, which owns 3 golf courses in Washington, D.C. Langston is one of them. East Potomac and Rock Creek are the 2 others. Well, the Park Service put up those 3 courses for kind of an open competition for a 50-year lease, long-term lease for the golf courses. The idea was that they were each subject to an enormous amount of deferred maintenance, and the Park Service kind of realized that the previous structures that they operated the golf courses under were not doing a good job of managing the properties from kind of every single way to look at that, from economics to the like conditions of the golf courses, to the interaction of the golf courses with the surrounding environments. And that's because the structure that the previous operators of the golf courses were operating under was called a concessions contract. And the long story short there is that a concessions contract does not allow for capital investment from the operator. Everything is kind of dictated from the Park Service down as to what's approved for infrastructure work. And golf courses require a lot of reinvestment and a lot of kind of continual investment in the upkeep of the golf course properties. And without the ability to do that, the courses were kind of deteriorating. And so to the Park Service's credit, they identified a lease structure is probably a better way to accomplish the management of these courses. And so they put the lease out to a competition, and my friend Will Smith and I saw what was happening, and we both grew up in DC. I learned to play at East Potomac, one of the 3 courses. I because of my interest in golf that was sparked out of starting there, I eventually went to school to design golf courses, and just was really loved the game. That when I was in grad school and thinking about what I wanted to write about for my thesis, I ended up writing about municipal golf and the fact that like you can have really good and engaging golf courses, but they don't have to be expensive and exclusionary. And so anyway, like there's just this big long tie between me and Will and golf in DC. And when this opportunity came up, we kind of went out to people we thought might be interested in putting in a bid, offered our services and our networks to try and help, and didn't get much interest. And in fact, kind of got the sense that they might head in an opposite direction and make the courses, whoever was going to put in a bid might want to make them expensive and maybe host PGA Tour events and generally take them in a direction that might threaten that the thing that makes those courses, all of these courses really special, which is their inclusive and welcoming nature. Is the place where people really get introduced to golf and form a connection to the game. They're just the most accessible places, location and economically in the game, and they're really important to protect. And so with that, kind of assessment of the landscape for this bid, we decided, hey, we could probably try it ourselves. So we formed the National Links Trust. We, made ourselves a nonprofit because we want everything that comes into the organization to go towards these projects over time. And, the point is to keep them affordable and accessible. And we think that, the nonprofit structure is the embodiment of how we can do that. So we ended up winning the bid. We got a bunch of really dedicated people involved in the organization. We leaned on our networks in the golf industry to get people to donate their expertise pro bono to the future renovations of these courses. And we got picked by the Park Service. And we've always thought from the beginning that what the Park Service wants out of these projects is right in line with what we want. And I'm definitely going to dig into a lot more of what that might be as we go. But generally it's this idea, I'll get to it in a second. The nuts and bolts, the basic requirement of the lease is to address the deferred maintenance at the golf courses. And we received kind of like an Excel spreadsheet of every single item that needs to be addressed. And it was thousands of items long. And what it really boils down to is it's every last square inch of every part of each property. And so like what that kind of forces you to step back and say, all right, instead of fixing every light bulb and changing every fixture and rebuilding everything exactly how it is, like, well, what are the things we can do to really make, holistically look at these projects and make the courses as good as they can be, while still, while being guided by what, the Park Service and what National Links Trust think are the most important, guiding principles, which is, the histories of the courses, both like the golf course design, side of things, but also the cultural significance of the courses and the communities that play there, as well as, how we can better provide access to the community, to the courses, how we can improve the relationship of the golf course to its surrounding environment, and how we can do all of these things while still keeping the courses affordable and accessible. So what we would like to do by doing all this is show that it's possible, that you can make these types of investments and still retain the communities that make the courses special, and expand on that. So now getting specifically into the history of Langston, East Potomac and Rock Creek were two courses that were built in the kind of very early 1920s. And at the same time as those courses were built, DC was segregated in terms of recreational facilities. And there was actually a golf course that was built by and for Black golfers that was kind of in and around the Lincoln Memorial on the grounds of the National Mall. And as the 20s progressed, the area around Lincoln Memorial got more and more busy, and the competition for the space became too much, and the government shut down the course. While the course was open, though, it created a really vibrant community of Black golfers in the city, and just like elsewhere, several golf clubs, and I'm kind of using that in the sense of like a country club is a group of people, a golf club is a group of people who play, together and are part of the same club. There were, two clubs in particular, the Royal Golf Club, which was a men's club, and the Wake Robin Golf Club, which is a women's club, that started at that Lincoln Memorial course. And when the course was shut down, they advocated for a golf course to be built in the city specifically for Black golfers. And after 10 years of work, the Langston site was chosen, and the golf course opened. Langston Golf Course opened in 1939. The course originally was 9 holes. And then it quickly expanded to 18 because it was extremely popular. And there's a whole bigger story involved here where the original course at Langston wasn't really up to the same standard as the other courses in DC, and like a pretty significant element of the civil rights movement played out at East Potomac in the golf community, where golfers from Langston were kind of, as a means to protest the conditions at Langston, they went and played at East Potomac, precipitating a conflict between the federal government's rules, which allowed African Americans to play at federal properties like Langston, but in the city of DC, where practically those properties were segregated. And so golf actually played like a pretty interesting role in the desegregation of facilities in DC, and and kind of the solidification of the federal government's policies to be inclusive of all races at a time where there was still heavy segregation in DC and elsewhere in the country. Langston was named after John Mercer Langston, the first African-American elected to Congress, and the first dean of the Howard Law School, and Lee Elder, who was the first Black golfer to play in the Masters, actually managed the Langston golf course in the late 70s and early 80s, and built the driving range that's there and made a bunch of improvements to the golf course. This is underselling the significance of Langston to the Black golf community in the United States. It was a place where kind of anyone of significance in that world has come and played the course, and that includes Muhammad Ali. Sorry, I'm blanking on. Why am I? Sorry, I'm getting stuck on boxers, but all of the, like, Calvin Peete, Lee Elder, Jim Thorpe, the full gamut of pioneers in the Black golf world, and Joe Lewis. I was thinking of Joe Lewis and couldn't pull the name out. Anyway, Joe Lewis actually has a tree on the Langston golf course named after him because of how many times he hit it. It's off the third hole, and it's still there today. So I'm going to take you through just quickly some plans for the course. These are the 9 holes that were originally built, and you can see Kingman Lake labeled up at the top of the drawing. Kingman Lake was entirely created. This is something you guys may all be well familiar with, but the Kingman Island and the Langston golf course, they were originally built on I guess a dump, and the construction of Kingman Lake was built to increase the navigability of the Anacostia River in an area where it was pretty marshy and harder to navigate. I believe it was chosen for that reason. It wasn't as a golf course site, it was not ripe for development because of its status as a former as a former dump. And so the golf course was kind of built on top of that, and for a long time there were pieces of debris coming up through the ground that were removed from the golf course, and part of the reason that the protests in the 40s around East Potomac came about because of the the conditions of the golf course at that time. Let's see. So I mean, as you can see in this drawing, part of the golf course is on Kingman Island, which is kind of in the bottom middle of the drawing, and then the rest is playing on kind of the western shore of Kingman Lake. This is just a picture from the 1940s before the back nine was built. But what it does show you is there, because of the man-made nature of the site, and particularly, the banks of Kingman Lake, there was absolutely no vegetation on that area before, the golf course was established. It was, fully a man-made and, kind of unnatural place. Just continuing on with some scenes from the history of Langston. As I mentioned, Lee Elder is on the far left of this picture, managed the course in the late 70s and early 80s. This is a picture of him at the Capital City Open, which he ran out of Langston, which attracted a ton of dignitaries in kind of the golf and entertainment world. At the center of this picture is Bob Hope. To Bob Hope's left is Lee Elder's wife, Rose Elder, who was a DC native and kind of the draw for Lee, who grew up elsewhere. And then this is kind of an oblique aerial overhead view of the site right now, which, just to draw, your attention back to the banks of Kingman Island and Kingman Lake and the river. By this point, the vegetation has grown incredibly thick along those areas, and thick with invasive vegetation, which we'll get to as in a little bit with some pictures in more detail. Just to kind of wrap up the arc here, what we're trying to do is fully renovate the golf course, the clubhouse, the driving range, the full property, and kind of create an environment for the golf course where there's a much better integration of the course to its natural environment. Right now, when you play on Kingman Island, you would be hard pressed to know that there is, the river or the lake adjacent to where you are, just with how thick the vines and overgrowth is on the edges of the lake and river. What we'd like to do is, create a much, create a buffer that does a better job of creating a link between the golf course landscape and the natural landscape. And there's a bunch of ways in which we're looking at accomplishing that. First, it's to remove the invasives and reopen that visual connection between the golf course and the river and lake. The next thing would be to establish native plant material in those places and create a better buffer that can work to filter water from stormwater and other and any runoff from the golf course before it gets to the river and the lake. And the next is to explore, there used to be a stream that ran through the middle of the front nine of the golf course that was covered over during the construction of the course, and we'd like to daylight that stream again. And then last would be to explore the viability of wetlands along the inside of the land property of the golf course, where we can take water from the course and filter it and in kind of a rain garden fashion, so that water that lands on the course and water from the surrounding community can take a more natural route through the course, and then ideally be retained on the course and never even make it into the lake, so that we have a way to kind of more naturally treat water that's coming from the surrounding neighborhood and from the golf course. We're in the middle of talking with the National Park Service and DOEE and partners like AWS about exactly how we'll go about doing that stuff. We have some conceptual designs that are being discussed at a pretty high level right now, but we're really excited to be working with stakeholders like AWS to figure out what the future looks like and how the golf course can best create a better intersection with the golf course space, which is admittedly like an unnatural environment, but to be a better be better functionally for the surrounding ecologies. Just a few things, National Links Trust is built on, trying to pursue initiatives on 5 different, what we're calling pillars. So community impact is one pillar. We have a workforce development program that's operating out of Langston, which has a few different elements. We have interns from DC schools working out at the course over the summer. We also have caddies who are working at the course, which are free of charge to golfers, but our program pays them for each loop, and they can get tips and other things from caddies and from the golfers who take the caddies. What's really cool about that program is that it connects into the Western Golf Association's Evans Scholar program, which provides scholarships for caddies to college. University of Maryland and Howard University are participating in that, along with a number of colleges all around the country, and it's like a full scholarship. So we started that program last summer, and we already have, I believe, 6 kids who are on track to get a full scholarship from that program. And we're expanding the program. I think last year we had 12 kids participate, and this year we have 20. And across the 3 courses for the intern program, I think we have something like 65 kids this year. So, it's just one element of the, community impact idea, but that's all under that pillar. Growing the game of golf, like Howard University just started a golf team, a varsity golf team in the past couple of years. And, our goal, and we're working with Howard to achieve it, is to have Langston be the home of the Howard University golf team. And, as a D1 program right now, we're not the golf course is not really at the level of quality that would be required for that. But we definitely think that with the right improvements to the practice facilities at Langston and the golf course, that we can be a home for the team that would have a ton of cultural significance for HBCUs to be at a golf course where was originally built for African-American golfers. And you can see in this picture Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors. He was kind of instrumental in the starting of the Howard golf team. He donated $1 million just 2 years ago, and the team was launched in this past year, and they were very successful in their first year. On the engaging architecture front, as another pillar, we have Bo Welling, who works with Tiger Woods on golf course design. Bo has donated his time to this project, and is a very well-known golf course architect. We're really excited to have him. Another pillar is alternative programming. So it's important for us to be thinking about not just the golf course and the golf course specific elements of what the property can be used for. One of the elements of this project is to have a Black Golf Museum at the clubhouse when we're done with the renovations there. I think that really ties in well, given the history of Langston and its importance in the game of golf, and the growth of a vibrant a community of Black golfers in the DC area. The other thing before I move on to sustainability is we're really, and I actually think this does tie in here, we're really focused on ways in which these properties, which take up a lot of space and they represent a lot of green space in the city, can be enjoyed not just by golfers. So from our perspective, we're trying to embrace as many things that can be done at these courses to bring non-golfers to the sites and experience what makes each of them really special. At Langston, obviously, that's the riverside setting. It's the cultural significance of the property. And so for us, it's going to be about like, how do we, bring people and expose more people to what makes these sites special. That might be through like something as simple as like a good F&B operation that can get people to the courses for food and, just like some time in a relatively open space in a part of, the city that doesn't have a ton of that. Or it could be for the Black Golf Museum or things of that nature. So, that brings me to sustainability and our partnership with Anacostia Watershed Society in particular. AWS was a huge component of our proposal for Langston to the Park Service. When we were putting together the proposal, we knew right away that that the removal of invasives and a restoration of a native plant environment as a buffer on Kingman Island, and on the mainland part of the golf course bordering Kingman Lake was a really big priority, and something that was going to not only make the golf course better, but much more importantly, make for a more sustainable, more connected environment that functions better, for the river. And AWS helped us think through, like what we might do to achieve that, given kind of the constraints of the golf course and the starting point, which was, like overgrowth of invasives everywhere. And so we have been working closely together ever since. One of the first things we realized was that in order to measure the impact of the work that we were trying to accomplish, we would need to measure the starting point of, what was the property like when we took it over, so that as we make improvements, we can measure, the impacts that they're having. And so, like the first big effort that we've done is to actually go through the property and survey the existing vegetation, including, all of the invasive species that are out there, what native species are out there, both trees, shrubs, vines, etc. And do it in a comprehensive way so that as we embark on this next level of the effort, which we've started in areas that we've already surveyed, that we can go back and kind of ensure that we're preserving what needs to be preserved, even while we're removing the vast amount of invasives that are out on the site. So just looking at some of the stats from this past year, we've had over 12 volunteer events with more than 200 volunteers working a ton of hours. This is, as you guys probably know really well, a labor intensive effort, and the work goes slowly, but it makes a huge difference. So far we've surveyed about 7.5 acres of the site. That's all of in the map on the right of the screen, that's all of the parts that are in light green. We still have, a good amount to go, but it gives us a great starting point as we start getting into the invasive removal efforts. We've, identified a number of native tree species, and it's funny when compared to the number of non-native species and invasive species, but it also goes to show, how the non-native invasives can, take over with kind of a monoculture when left unmaintained. We on Earth Day, we released 1,100 mussels into Kingman Lake along the golf course, and we've identified over 50 species of birds and 7 types of mammals, and documented the return of beavers and otters to Kingman Island around the course. Just getting into a little bit of the pictures of the existing conditions and then the work that we've done. This is a view of bush honeysuckle to the left of the 10th fairway on the golf course. This is pretty typical in that it's just, and in the winter you can see through this, so you can get a sense of the depth of what we've been dealing with. But in the summer, looking at this same view would just look like a wall of green vines. It kind of get a view of that here. This is a little chunk that was tackled in a recent invasive removal volunteer day, and the after of that same area. It does go to show, when the shrub layer is that thick, that there's often not a lot left behind when it's removed. But you can see that we do a really targeted job to make sure that the native species are do remain at the end of that work. It's a lot of handwork as a result, and again, just a really big effort. From a recent volunteer day with AWS behind the 10th green on Kingman Island, this is a crew working to to remove vines and invasive shrubs. And you can see the view that results, from at the end of the day, looking out over Kingman Lake. And our job now really is to, as we remove these, vines and shrubs, is to A, ensure that they don't come back, and B, start by establishing, a native grass kind of meadow type mix to that we can maintain and ensure that the, invasives don't come back through the new vegetation, and then plant back into that over time. And, we're just at the start of both planning and executing on that work. Another view of an area where invasive removal was done, and how you get some filtered views through to Kingman Lake from the golf course afterwards. And another here, this is left of the 18th tee. It's really remarkable. One of the things that we talked about with Ariel and Jorge back at the start of this project was, well, what kind of reaction might we get from golfers, and how to communicate what we're doing, so that there's a level of understanding on both the what existing conditions we started with, and where we're trying to go with the ecologies around Kingman Lake. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there, to communicate why what we're doing is so important. But even as we were getting into this work, we're really just at the start of it now. It's amazing the feedback that we're getting from golfers right off the bat, and the recognition of the importance of the landscape at the golf course, and how far gone it had been from a maintenance standpoint, and how improved it is going forward. So I think it's just a really rich opportunity to be able to blend, our two organizations' messages, and explain why and how the golf course can be a good steward to the environment, and be a much, better, a better buffer, a better, neighbor than it has been in the past. So I think I'll probably, kind of start wrapping it up and open it up for questions. Just like a couple of last things, just the timeline of the project is, likely to happen over, between now and, 2026 in phases. What we were just showing is kind of that initial invasive removal. That's ongoing now, obviously. Like the bigger renovation projects where you address the driving range facility, the golf course, and the clubhouse, those would happen, it's really kind of tied to the permitting and compliance effort, but that's likely to happen in several years after, we make it through the environmental assessment and historic preservation planning and compliance efforts. And then, this is just, for anyone who's interested in, helping out or continuing to help out with the work around the golf course. Obviously, there are several ways to engage, by volunteering at the invasive removal events, and then really, kind of the traditional ways of spreading the word about what we're doing, and the importance of, or maybe the opportunity associated with the golf course for the, the health of the Anacostia River, and just, kind of, getting that information out to your networks. And, obviously we've got a lot of money to raise in order to accomplish these projects, and, any, financial support or ideas about ways to get funding for the types of, wetland and stream work that we're doing would be great. And just looking forward to, continuing to engage with the Anacostia Watershed Society to help make sure that, the finished product of the golf course, which is never finished, obviously, because it's just requires continual effort to maintain a native environment along the river and lake, but that that the finished product with recognizing that is as good as it can possibly be. So thanks, and definitely interested in answering any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mike. That was awesome. That was a really great overview. And I think that, hopefully folks on the call can see that this is sort of a, non-traditional golf course operator, right? The National Links Trust is a welcome player in the restoration of the course, right? And also in really looking at the sustainability. So we are definitely really excited about that. Do we have questions? In terms of questions, you can feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question. If you have a question, we're a small enough group, that's fine. Or if you'd rather just type it in the chat, you can go ahead and do that too. Stella, yeah, kick us
Thanks,
off.
Ariel. Yeah, really interesting presentation. I've been kind of dying to learn about the golf course for years. So thank you for giving us this opportunity and platform. And it's really encouraging to see the sustainability work going on. Really, so many opportunities, like you said. My question relates to climate change. I'm curious to what extent and how are you taking climate change into account? And I'm also wondering, have you ever looked at the golf courses as the so-called sponge parks? Is flooding inevitable, and or may there be periods when it'll be a fully functional golf course with all of its sustainability features, but may for a week or two sometimes be underwater, and it would be part of the kind of water absorption of the city?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it's definitely something that's at the front of our minds in terms of we're planning for the next 50 years. And obviously, I think everyone knows that things don't, stay in stasis, and we're obviously trending in a certain direction, and we need to plan for that. I would kind of rate, so as we are thinking about this, I'd say a lot of our thought is directed to East Potomac, where the flood potential is even more likely to occur. At Langston, though, and let me just say, I think this strategy that I'm about to describe applies both to East Potomac, but I'm not going to talk about that, and to Langston. One of the things we've hit on here is that I think there's an opportunity for some wetland creation as part of the golf course renovation project, which, like I said, is on one level is designed so that water from the neighborhoods and water that lands on the golf course ends up in one of these buffer wetlands, and there's an opportunity to filter water, and only in the most extreme rain events would anything even make it out of those wetlands and into the lake. At the same time, though, I think it does basically speak to what you're talking about in a flood event. It's an opportunity to provide a place for water to go that currently doesn't really exist. Instead of shedding downstream, there's a significantly increased capacity for the golf course to retain water. On top of that, I'm trying to think from an engineering perspective whether it would be possible to design something where it's without kind of fundamentally altering, everything about the landscape, whether we could keep more water on the site, which I think is a really interesting idea in a super flood event. How do we contribute? I think on one level, the course is already fairly low, and this would apply to East Potomac too. And it's likely to be one of the things that's covered by water in a flood event, kind of no matter what. So, I think, we certainly are looking at whatever water does land on the course, we'd like to keep there. Whatever water comes from a flood, we would be keeping a chunk of it, by design of the engineered infrastructure from a stormwater management perspective. So the answer is yes. Like beyond that, I don't know, necessarily what opportunities would be to like do something bigger than that. But certainly like what we do recognize is that the golf course could do an even a much better job of, of being more functional for the, from a stormwater perspective for the, not just the course itself, but for its surrounding area. And we definitely want to, do what we can to embrace that.
Awesome. Other questions for Mike? Got a question in the chat about, is there a timeline on the daylighting of the stream? Do projects like that conflict with upgrading the course for Howard's future use, which is very cool? How do you kind of resolve the, environmental goals with the making it a,
Yeah.
D1 course for Howard? Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, like, I think there's probably a thought, right, that golf courses are by definition, quote unquote, bad for the environment. And to the extent that they're like unnatural places, like we're planting grass and mowing it short and things like that, I think that's true to some extent. I also think that like relative to other forms of development, it can be really, really good, right? Especially in the integration of, of elements of the landscape that can help from, like from a stormwater perspective, or to establish, pollinator habitat and edge habitats that otherwise are, few and far between in urban areas. And certainly like at Langston, we have a ton of buffer space, between the golf course and the river that, we want to, and we can do a great job of actively managing to be like the best version of what, those kind of riparian habitats can be. So we want to be a really good steward to the site. And I don't necessarily think that's in conflict with wanting to be, the host of Howard and like what they might look for in a golf course. I think we're looking for something that, blends in with the natural environment as opposed to is imposed on the natural environment. I get that that's a distinction that's only as good as us executing on it, but certainly been involved with a lot of golf course projects that kind of are on the bleeding edge of the spectrum towards a more natural environment, and especially in the ways in which like the golf course space intersects with its surrounds. From the stream perspective, what we'd like to do is do that at the same time we do the golf course renovation. I mean, I think like just from a logistical standpoint, like just getting the construction that's going to happen out there done at the same time is probably the best way to do it. We think that the stream, kind of is a benefit to the full, to all of the end users of the project. And an end user is obviously like the surrounding environment as well. Like we would be building a stream that has, a 40-foot buffer on the sides and restores something that was lost. It takes water from the neighborhood through pipes that currently just outlet directly into Kingman Lake, and it would help, from our perspective, take a part of the property which is basically like open and treeless right now, and bring something of interest to the golf course while at the same time being something that functionally works for the kind of the environmental system of the golf course and its surroundings. So, I mean, hopefully that answers the question. I mean, I think I understand the nature of it, but I hope that with what we do in this project, we can kind of show, just how well these things can work together to create a better outcome than, without, like kind of thinking holistically about the course and everything around it.
That's great. That's great. He said, excellent answer. So I think you answered his question. Right, we've got a couple more minutes here. We're almost to 7 o'clock, but do people have other questions for Mike about the plans for Langston or the history? I loved hearing about the history too. Thank you for that, Mike.
It's really amazing. I mean, we could do an entire thing just about that. It's like spectacular how many people really care about Langston, and how much history there's out there on like kind of even on a daily basis today. The group that hangs out at Langston is really tied into the history of the course. And one of the main characters out there is this guy Jelly Hansen, who's the former caddy of Lee Elder on the PGA Tour, and he's they're kind of evangelizing for Langston every day to everybody who comes through. It's really neat.
That's awesome. Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Ariel, and thank you, Michael, for a terrific presentation, as well as thank you for your enthusiastic partnership with AWS, which I think is just great. My question is, your business model in the long term do you anticipate that these 3 golf courses will be self-sustaining financially, or will they continue to rely on some funding from the NPS and in-kind donations and that sort of thing? What does the long-term business plan look like?
Yeah, good question. Well, a couple things. There's no funding from the Park Service at all. And the courses are self-sustaining right now. In the scheme of things, East Potomac makes the bulk of the money. Langston makes some. Rock Creek loses money. That's the general setup right now. But overall, as a set, they make money. What we're trying to do is use the nonprofit and donations to help make the capital improvements possible without having to pass off, the cost of those investments to the end user. That's the basic model. There's a couple things that we've got that make that slightly less daunting. Since the courses do make money, whatever the courses make go towards making these projects happen. And they make a good chunk of change. And we actually have to pay the Park Service for rent to operate the courses, but we can offset the rent with the dollars that we spend on capital improvement. So we are incentivized to spend money to make these projects happen, because otherwise we'd be giving the money to the Park Service. But yeah, I mean, if we were to just wait for the courses to cash flow their way to have enough to do these projects, we'd be waiting till the end of the lease. So the philanthropy, donations, they're designed to help us accelerate that so that we can do it and not have to borrow money, which we then have to pass off to the end user.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, the work that you're going to be doing, that you plan to do for wetlands restoration, invasive species control, and all that stuff, it's terrific. It's also, to some extent, an ongoing expense.
Yeah.
And as you think about the management of these golf courses going forward, are you figuring in that continuing maintenance that's going to be required to keep invasive species at bay, and to keep them out of the wetlands, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be an ongoing expense that hopefully will lessen over time as the new areas that you're developing take hold. But that is going to be a significant expense that if it is ignored, the gains that you make over the next few years will be lost. So I'm wondering, have you thought about in the finance and management of these courses, how you're going to sustain those expenditures in the long term?
Yeah, no, another, really good point. So we have thought about that, partly through, from the beginning through partnerships like AWS, where, you learn, and this is my first time kind of going through something from, this, I went to school for landscape architecture. Like I have some background, but not in like the specific execution of something of this nature. And so AWS has been great from the beginning and kind of highlighting it's not just a one-shot deal and you're done. It's something that lasts, well beyond that. And it's just a continued effort. It just doesn't stop. So I think we recognize that and we're budgeting for that. One of the things that is good about the MPS structure in terms of us deferring, not offsetting revenue, offsetting rent, is that because like the whole process is an effort to address deferred maintenance. Like in a theoretically perfect world, there would have been no invasive and non-native species out there in the first place. So our effort to remove and then keep out that vegetation can be offset. The dollars we spend offset our rent. So there's an incentive to keep doing it. And we're going to have to figure out kind of like what the right cadence and what the right plan of attack is, because it's a big effort and it's going to require probably a mix of volunteer work, but probably something where it's like we've got three basic ways to attack it, right? Is one, volunteer; two, our in-house maintenance teams; three, third parties, right? And it's going to have to be a mix of all of that, I think, in order to be effective.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we've come to 7 o'clock. So thank you, Mike, for being with us and for sharing all of this information. And thank you everyone for joining us. We will have information about our next Watershed Wednesday coming out soon. So stay tuned there. And we can stay on if anybody has any final questions, but otherwise, thank you all for joining us and have a great night. And thanks again, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for all that you all have done to help out at Langston, and we're really looking forward to continuing the effort and making even more progress.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Stop the recording. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.